Welcome to NTD News. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Here are today's top stories. The number of deaths from the coronavirus outbreak rises, but the Chinese regime keeps locals in the dark, and many who need treatment can't get it. Measures to limit new U.S. cases of the coronavirus came into force over the weekend. Flights into the U.S. from China are subject to strict entry limitations. Countdown to Iowa. Democratic hopefuls are on their last campaign push ahead of the state's caucus tonight. And a record-breaking number of Hispanics are projected to vote in the 2020 election. Clinton won the majority in 2016, but this time, conservatives are expecting more support for the GOP. As nations around the world respond to the coronavirus outbreak, many locals where it all began can't get the treatment they need, and the death toll is rising.
Locals are saying Wuhan is a dead city. After its lockdown, they told NTD even the buses have stopped running, and police phone lines are always engaged, so there's no one to call in an emergency. Sources on the ground told NTD that most people with symptoms of the coronavirus are told they have regular pneumonia. Relatives of the patients say thousands of people are lining up for the test kits. Chinese media Cai Jing interviewed more than 10 families, most of whom were ill. They said the hospitals don't have enough test kits to diagnose them or enough beds to admit them. Without a diagnosis, people who pass away are assumed to have regular pneumonia, making the official death count inaccurate. A Wuhan resident took a hidden camera into a hospital in Wuhan. He said he saw 8 bodies being moved out of the hospital within 5 minutes. Taiwan on Monday listed the eastern Chinese city of Guangzhou as the number 2 biggest endemic area, prohibiting people from that city from entering Taiwan. As for other cities, most people in Beijing choose to stay indoors and many shops remain closed. And in Hong Kong, medical professionals are concerned about the spread. The Hong Kong government has closed down the railway link to mainland China, but not border crossing points for travelers using other travel methods. Thousands of hospital workers started the first stage of a strike on Monday, and they say if their demands are not met, there will be more strikes to come.
If we don't shut down the border from mainland China, the community outbreak in Hong Kong would happen very soon, as we expect. So we hope the government could act faster, could act as soon as possible to shut the border.
In terms of the economy, Wuhan's new coronavirus has brought unprecedented disruption to mainland China, and alarm is rising across the globe. A senior banker in Hong Kong, Wu Mingde, predicts China's GDP growth could decline by 15% this year.
U.S. travel restrictions are now in an effort to contain the Wuhan coronavirus. Health officials confirmed 3 more cases of the virus in the U.S. on Sunday. That brings the total to 11.
U.S. travel restrictions barring foreign nationals who have recently visited China began Sunday evening. The announcement came on Friday as the coronavirus was declared a public health emergency.
Foreign nationals, other than immediate family of U.S. citizens and permanent residents who have traveled in China within the last 14 days, will be denied entry into the United States for this time.
President Trump said on Sunday that the U.S. can't have thousands of people with the infection coming into the country. U.S. citizens who have traveled in China within 14 days will be directed to one of 7 airports designated for screening. Those who enter the U.S. after visiting the Hubei province will be quarantined for 2 weeks. Russia's prime minister said on Monday that Russia plans to expel foreigners who test positive for the virus. Chinese people arriving in Russia will be held in quarantine for 14 days, even if they test negative for the virus. Australia on Saturday announced it too is barring entry to all foreign nationals traveling from mainland China. New Zealand announced the same on Sunday. Singapore and Vietnam have also announced restrictions on travel from China. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo spoke on Monday about additional flights bringing Americans back from China's Hubei province. He said the flights may also bring back citizens from other countries. The government hopes to send over medical supplies on the aircraft into the region. These are expected to happen in the next few days. The United States was the first to begin evacuations. Numerous other nations have also been evacuating their citizens. Meanwhile, all three major U.S. carriers, Delta Airlines, American Airlines, and United, announced Friday they were suspending all flights between the U.S. and China. These flights are not planned to resume until the end of March, with some resuming at the end of April. They join several international carriers that have already stopped flying to China.
And the White House said on Sunday that while it offered to help contain the outbreak, the Chinese regime hasn't accepted yet. Investors erased roughly $400 billion from China's benchmark stock index today. It's the first day of trade in China since the Lunar New Year, and fears about the coronavirus are having an economic impact.
China's stock market suffered its worst drop in nearly 5 years on Monday as the virus hit mainland reopened its exchanges for the first time since the Lunar New Year holiday. Fears over the new coronavirus saw investors selling the yuan and dumping commodities, with around $400 billion wiped from the Shanghai Composite Index. The benchmark closed nearly 8% lower, the biggest one-day drop since 2015. The ticker around the Shanghai Stock Exchange, which would have shown a plunge, was shut off on Monday. Investors are bracing for volatility as the spread of the new coronavirus weighs on the world's growth outlook. The virus has already killed more people in China than the death toll there from SARS in 2003. Within China, the yuan began trading at its weakest this year, and commodities like copper hit their maximum down limits. The wipeout came even as the central bank made its biggest cash injection to the financial system since 2004. Reactions outside China were more muted. The MSCI's broadest index of Asia-Pacific shares outside Japan fell less than 1%, but that was still its 8th straight day of losses. Analysts expect markets in China to remain under pressure as the number of virus infections is still likely to increase in the weeks ahead.
Excitement is building in Iowa today as voters prepare for the state's Democratic caucus. The state is the first to choose its nominee for president. Meetings begin tonight.
Iowa voters will gather at caucus sites around the state on Monday to begin choosing a challenger to President Donald Trump. The state only has 41 delegates out of the almost 2,000 needed to secure the nomination, but it holds influence thanks to its status as the first state to vote. Usually a field of candidates will narrow to the top 3 or 4 after Iowa's caucus.
Democracy starts here in Iowa every 4 years because you let only a certain bunch of us out of the gate.
And getting out in front is important. Since 1996, every Democrat who has won the caucuses has gone on to secure the party's nomination. From Iowa, the candidates will move on to New Hampshire, Nevada, and South Carolina.
These first 4 states amount to the critical early tests, not only of the strength of our organization, but the strength of our message.
Who will win is still uncertain. Officials scrapped the caucus's bellwether poll on Sunday after an error left Pete Buttigieg off at least one survey. Bernie Sanders has recently surged in other polls, taking the lead from Joe Biden. He's been calling on his supporters to bring as many people as possible to the caucuses.
If the turnout is high, we're going to win.
Iowans don't go to a polling site to cast their ballots. Instead, they hold a series of meetings across the state, gathering in school cafeterias, community centers, and private living rooms to decide their party's nomination.
Lots of excitement there. We'll have the results for you as they come in. And the Pew Research Center says this year Hispanics will make a larger turnout. They mostly voted Democrat in 2016, but their rising approval rating of the president has people speculating. NTD's Miguel Moreno has more.
Hispanics are projected to be the largest ethnic minority of voters in the 2020 election, a 14% increase from 2016, surpassing black voters. Despite President Trump losing the majority of these voters in the election, the fraction he did get helped him win swing states like Florida and Michigan by the hair. To some, this was a surprise, but he says he knows what they want.
You know, my poll numbers with Hispanics went way up, and they said, I wonder how that is. You want strong borders. Well, the Hispanics know better than anyone. You don't want people coming into our country that are going to do harm to you.
But several polls suggest it's likely Democrats will get the majority of these votes again. So far, independent Bernie Sanders and Democrat Joe Biden appear to be getting the most support.
I don't believe we're the nation that builds walls, whips up hysteria about an invasion of immigrants that's going to do terrible things to us.
But the number of Hispanics who say the Democratic Party cares about them more than any other party has dropped 11% from 2015 to 2018. At a Latinos for Liberty town hall, chairman of the Republican National Hispanic Assembly said the climate is changing.
I think that, Telemundo and Univision, which are huge news outlets for the Hispanic community and Latino community, they are making people ask questions. Do we support illegal immigration? We kind of came here, we picked ourselves up by our bootstraps to come here legally.
As for the president, radio host Rich Valdez said he's making the right moves, like starting the Evangelicals for Trump coalition at a Hispanic megachurch.
So I think Trump knows where to look for the support that he has. He's not creating new support, he's just rallying the support he has, and I think a lot of people are going to be surprised.
However, Hispanics don't only care about immigration. Studies show they've actually prioritized jobs and the economy. President Trump plans to cover this ground at his State of the Union address on Tuesday. Miguel Moreno, NTD News, New York.
Apparently, Facebook's ad policy is too scary for horror novelist Stephen King. King announced on Friday that he's quitting the social media platform, and his profile has been deleted. The author wrote on Twitter that he's uncomfortable with the false information Facebook allows in its political advertising. He also cited concerns about the site's ability to guard user privacy. The social media giant has faced intense scrutiny over its decision to allow politicians to run ads with false information. In addition to being a prolific author, King is politically active and very outspoken. He is still on Twitter, which announced in October that it will stop accepting political ads. And a Chinese-American former engineer has been indicted on charges of violating federal export control laws. While working for a major U.S. defense contractor, prosecutors say he took his work laptop without authorization to China. His laptop contained classified missile technology data.
According to the indictment, Wei's son worked as an electrical engineer at Raytheon Missile Systems for a decade. The company produces missile and missile defense systems for the U.S. military. It is a subsidiary of Raytheon, which is the fourth largest U.S. defense contractor. During his employment, Sun held a secret-level security clearance. He had access to sensitive advanced missile defense technology. Court records said Sun had spoken of going overseas with his laptop, but had been warned it was against company policy and federal laws. Prosecutors allege he went anyway in January 2019. An assessment of Sun's laptop by a Raytheon lawyer confirmed that it contains sensitive defense information. The data is subject to export restrictions under the International Traffic in Arms Regulations. Sun was indicted in February 2019 in a case heard at the U.S. District Court for the District of Arizona. He has pleaded not guilty and is currently being held without bail. The case forms part of a growing list of federal prosecutions related to espionage by the Chinese state.
Sun is set to appear in court on February 14th. He is expected to change his plea to guilty as part of a plea agreement with prosecutors. And coming up, police shoot a man who stabbed people in a London terrorist attack. Find out what UK politicians seek to change in laws governing terrorist offenses when we return.
Viewers have described China Uncensored like The Daily Show, but about China.
At the beginning, I was super excited when I got 500 views, and now the show's grown to about 500,000 subscribers on YouTube. One episode reached 7.9 million people. I'm a little freaked out that that many people have seen my face. In 5 years, I see China Uncensored as the sole source of edutainment worldwide.
Police shot dead a man in South London on Sunday after a stabbing incident. Police are saying the attack was terrorism related.
I went to the window to check what was going on, and I saw police officers circling the area and one police officer in particular pointing a gun at the individual.
Armed officers shot a man in a busy residential district in South London after several people were stabbed with a knife. One man that was stabbed was being treated for life-threatening injuries. A woman suffered less serious wounds and another woman was hurt by glass. The incident was quickly declared as a terrorist incident and believed to be Islamist related. The city's mayor Sadiq Khan believes the incident was preventable. He said in a statement that, quote, "Terrorists seek to divide us and to destroy our way of life. Here in London, we will never let them succeed."
Both these attacks, the one in November and the one yesterday, were preventable and foreseeable. I've been concerned for some time and I've made my views clear in relation to changes in law made by the government, which mean that judges haven't got the tools they used to have to keep people in prison longer who are still a danger to the public.
In response to the attack, British Prime Minister Boris Johnson has promised to set out tougher rules on releasing people convicted of terrorism offensives.
Britain has laid out a tough opening stance for talks with the EU over post-Brexit trading relationships, despite appeals from business to ensure goods can travel freely across borders.
Irish Prime Minister Leo Varadkar says Britain and the European Union should avoid rigid red lines, as they could make it difficult to secure a post-Brexit trade agreement.
Let's not repeat some of the errors that were made in the past 2.5 years.
But he may be disappointed. On Sunday, Britain laid out a tough opening stance for future talks, saying it would set its own agenda, rather than meeting the EU bloc's rules to ensure frictionless trade. After Big Ben bonged Britain out of the EU on Friday, the country now has until the end of the year to negotiate a future trade relationship. The EU has repeatedly told the UK that the amount of access to its lucrative single market depends on how far London agrees to a level playing field, shorthand for adhering to rules on environmental standards, labour regulations and state aid. But despite appeals from many businesses for the government to ensure goods can trade freely across borders, they've been briefed by ministers to adjust to a future when Britain does not stick to EU rules. This was Foreign Minister Dominic Raab on Sunday.
We're taking back control of our laws, so we're not going to have high alignment with the EU, legislative alignment with their rules, but we want to cooperate, and we expect the EU to follow through on their commitment to a Canada-style free trade agreement, and that's what we're pursuing.
Boris Johnson is aiming for a trade deal allowing tariff and quota-free trade in goods, similar to terms the bloc has in place with Canada. But sources close to the British Prime Minister say he's taken last year's election, in which he won a large majority, as approval for his policy of putting Britain's right to set its own rules above the demands of businesses. He will outline that approach in a speech on Monday, but put simply, he's telling Brussels that Brexit, for him, means sovereignty trumps the economy.
Up next, the Kansas City Chiefs end a 50-year drought in a dramatic come-from-behind win at Super Bowl 54. Find out how it all played out after the break.
Are you tired of newspapers spinning the truth and pushing false narratives? And are you looking for honest coverage of Spygate, the true story of collusion? Or the truth behind the crisis at our southern border? Or how the Chinese Communist Party is working to subvert America and our way of life? Then you need to check out the Epoch Times newspaper. It's independent, nonpartisan, and it doesn't push any political agendas. Just go to readepic.com and try it yourself for a full month for just $1. You'll absolutely love it.
The Kansas City Chiefs win their first Super Bowl in 50 years. They came back from a 10-point deficit in the fourth quarter to eventually defeat the 49ers by 11 points.
The Kansas City Chiefs have won Super Bowl 54, defeating the San Francisco 49ers in a 31-20 comeback in South Florida. Before the game, the Chiefs had only one other Super Bowl win in their history, 50 years ago during Super Bowl IV. The Chiefs came back from a 10-point deficit in the last quarter of the game. 24-year-old Chiefs quarterback Patrick Mahomes led the team back to eventual victory. The Chiefs applied offensive pressure off of successful Mahomes passes and eventually eroded the 49ers' solid defensive play. The touchdown that would seal the lead for the Chiefs was contested, but not overturned by officials. San Francisco quarterback Jimmy Garoppolo couldn't get his team back in the game after that and was smothered by the Chiefs' defense with 1 minute 25 left to play. The Chiefs regained possession and scored another touchdown soon after. They then removed all potential for a 49ers victory with an interception before the game clock ran out, to much celebration. Fans watching the game from Kansas City also celebrated the win. Kansas City Mayor Quinton Lucas tweeted video of himself at the game in Florida and said he wants to have a parade on Wednesday.
After effectively taking control of African soccer, FIFA says its mission to speed up reforms on the continent is complete.
FIFA is ending its 6-month intervention in African soccer's governing organization, saying its mission to speed up reform on the continent was, quote, successfully completed. World Soccer's ruling body effectively took over the running of African football after corruption scandals engulfed the Confederation of African Football, or CAF, last year. That included allegations against CAF President Ahmed, which he has denied. Now that FIFA's work is apparently done, it has presented the CAF Executive Committee with a number of proposals. These include the creation of a group of professional referees and a $1 billion fund to invest in infrastructure, including stadiums in all 54 African member associations. Some of the ideas were outlined by FIFA President Gianni Infantino on Saturday and include a Pan-African Super League with 20 permanent teams and holding the African Cup of Nations every 4 years instead of 2. New initiatives in women's soccer, youth categories, and national team competitions were also proposed, as well as a 100-point good governance plan.
And off the coast of New York, tens of thousands made their way into cold waters in support of a good cause. NTD's Kevin Hogan has the details.
On the shore in Long Beach, New York, about 15,000 people stood on the sand on Sunday, with some even taking a dip in the cold waters.
Oh, it's awesome. This is about the 10th
We
year
don't know what
I've
kind of
done
car
this.
it is, but if you
And
lost
it's
your car
amazing.
keys,
It's
we
a great
have them.
cause. It's 30 minutes of 30 seconds of insanity.
If you have
and
a
it's
Jeep.
great.
This is the 20th annual Polar Bear Plunge, an event where people submerge themselves in icy waters to support the Make-A-Wish Foundation. Participants swam in 42-degree water, which according to Coast Guard charts can cause a person to fall unconscious within 30 minutes. But even that hasn't stopped people from coming out.
Why not? Put me up to it, I'm going to do it. This is great. I work with special needs children, so I know that maybe they'll get a nice trip someplace. A trip to Disney World or something. It's awesome. It's nice to know that it can be a small part.
Since 2000, the community has raised $7 million to help grant the wishes of critically ill children. All event proceedings are given to Make-A-Wish Metro, New York. Kevin Hogan, NTD News.
Up next, critically acclaimed classical dance company Shen Yun is touring the world. Hear why a 14-time Emmy-winning news anchor raves about the show and more when we return. Since 2006, the classical dance group Shen Yun has been growing from one tour company to 7 equally large companies. They travel around the globe simultaneously with one goal in mind: to revive ancient Chinese culture. What makes Shen Yun so popular among the public? Let's hear from the audience.
It was spectacular, all the colors, the beautiful movements, and when the actors and the artists dance and they tumble, they're so graceful. It's almost as if they have wings.
A 14-time Emmy-winning reporter and news anchor Marcella Lee brought her family along to see Shen Yun in San Diego to celebrate the Chinese New Year.
It was almost like we took a trip as a family back in time and got to relive what it might have been like back in the days of the Manchurian. We saw the palaces and all kinds of history here brought into real life in living color for my kids, and that was what was so unique for me, to expose them to some of the Chinese history that dates back thousands of years.
This is a really good example of how you're bringing culture into today's environment, and so it's just spectacular. It's wonderful.
Since Shen Yun's 2020 tour began, it has received high praise from people around the globe. A well-known Italian soprano was in awe when she saw Shen Yun in Modena. It was magical. I've just emerged from a magical world of color, harmony, and perfection. I must say that in my life I've seen many performances, many ballets, but such professionalism really is rare. I would say there is a spirit to this company, and this spirit guides these marvelous artists. From legends to ethnic dance to stories of modern-day China, Shen Yun's mission is to bring back the traditional values that have been deeply rooted in ancient Chinese culture but nearly lost in society today. A Canadian singer and composer, Judith Berard, was moved to tears after seeing those values presented on stage. This made me feel so good. I was wrapped in sweetness, something I don't feel in everyday life, so my tears were coming down. The grace that was emitted from the scene wrapped and carried me up. NTD News, New York.
And royals and celebrities flocked to last night's glittering ceremony in London for the BAFTAs. The big winner of the night, First World War drama 1917, picking up 7 awards, including Best Picture and Director for Sam Mendes.
The thrilling World War I drama 1917 picked up 7 awards at the BAFTAs. Shot in what appears to be a single take, 1917 was honored in the Outstanding British Film, Sound, Production Design, Cinematography, and Special Visual Effects categories.
I feel determined to enjoy every second of this because I find it difficult to imagine those circumstances and those conditions ever happening again.
South Korean satire Parasite triumphed in the original screenplay and film not in the English language categories.
I think it's a sad portrait of our current times.
She's a great dancer.
And streaming giant Netflix won with Marriage Story, which saw Laura Dern win Best Supporting Actress. Dern recalled when she was 6 years old, her mother had won a BAFTA in the same category.
My mom told me that it's what friends give you to congratulate you because you get to have the job you love. So thank you, BAFTA.
Martin Scorsese's star-studded gangster drama The Irishman, which was nominated in 10 categories, left empty-handed.
And you can expect an early spring this year. That's because Phil the Groundhog did not see his shadow on Sunday.
For there is no shadow of me. Spring will be early. It's a certainty. It's early spring, ladies and gentlemen.
He delivered the most desired verdict to the cheers of his followers, braving the early morning show. The annual Groundhog Day event at Gobbler's Knob has Punxsutawney declaring whether winter will last 6 more weeks or if spring will come early. It's based on whether or not he sees his own shadow after appearing from his winter den. This is the 134th Groundhog Day and only the 20th time in history that Phil has not seen his shadow. And that's all for now. Thanks for tuning in. Join us again tonight. I'm Tiffany Meyer.